Welcome to the Data Democracy, presented by renowned O'Reilly author Ole Olesen-Bagneux, empowered by Xenia. Make your data accessible and discoverable by anyone, anywhere, at any time.
Säde, hi, I'm happy to have you.
Thank you. Very happy to be here today.
And for the listeners out there, hi everybody, you're listening to The Data Democracy. I'm your host, Ole Olesen-Bagneux, Chief Evangelist in Xenia and the author of the Enterprise Data Catalog published by O'Reilly. In this podcast, we explore what a data democracy is. And today's guest is Säde Haveri. Säde is a data management freelancer focusing on data governance, data catalogs, and data modeling. I came across Säde's profile on LinkedIn as she posted some quite qualified and in-depth views on why we keep making the same mistakes in data management and what we can do about it. And so to open the conversation, Säde, can you share a bit more on your professional experience and what you do?
Yes. Well, maybe if I start with the fact that this is now the first time that I'm starting as a consultant or a freelancer. I've been working in the industry for 16 years, always with data. My background is in data warehousing and BI development. Also worked as an analyst for some time there. And I've kind of been always working in the gap between the data and then the people who use the data. So the people who use the data, they need to understand what is available so they can fill their needs. And on the other hand, if they need new development, then someone needs to interpret that technically into what needs to be built. So this is kind of the space where I've always worked in. And this is also how I kind of got excited or interested in the data catalog and the metadata area, because I see a lot of problems in this between area that I think that could be solved with these new kind of tools and technologies and yeah.
I very much agree. I mean, that's also kind of the space I've been in, sitting between technology and people or line of business, right? I personally experienced the hassle of trying to implement a data catalog. I think it was 6-7 years ago now, and
Sure.
you get those dilemmas when you try to do something that really represent a technological picture that is quite difficult, but you try to explain that to people with perhaps not that much of a technological experience. Is that kind of what you have also? To what extent does that mirror your experience?
Yeah, it sounds very familiar. So I at some point I described my role as a Babelfish, from
Uh,
the Babelfish from the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It's
no,
this fish you put in the
it's the one of the books on my reading list. I'm really ashamed about not having read yet. So can you elaborate a bit on that one?
Yeah, so it's first of all great book, one of my
Yeah,
favorites. So the Babelfish
absolutely.
is a tiny alien that you put in your ear, and it eats the kind of sound waves and then poops the correct language for you. So that is how it operates. But this is, in a sense, how I used to describe my role. That it's like I listen to the different languages. That technology, to me, technology is a language. Reporting has its own language. Business has its own language, and then I interpret between these. So yes, sounds very familiar.
Yeah. But yeah, I like that. I like that image of the Babelfish a lot. I think that's very, very correct, and I also agree on the fact of technology being a language. How would you characterize that language? Why is it difficult for business users to understand?
I think there's also a lot of like misinterpretations or kind of wrong ideas about what technology is. I mean, and also maybe like this kind of preconceived ideas. For example, that technology is difficult or that coding is difficult. It's a language. If you can speak French, apparently you can't. I can't. but I can do SQL. So I should be
Mhm.
able to learn French if I want. But so far
Yeah.
I haven't. So far I've thought that I don't, maybe not the first thing, but I mean it is a language, so it's not really difficult in a sense, but it's a different kind of language, and the words are expressing different things than the normal language. But I think that a lot of the difficulty is just that often we perceive technology as somehow very difficult when it's maybe just the fact that the information that we would like is not available. So it's not kind of difficult, but it's the somehow concealed.
Mhm, mhm. I think I very much agree in this. I don't know to what extent you mentioned prior to the recording that we're doing now. You mentioned that you have read my book. I don't know to what extent that you sensed that perspective in my book, but I very much agree with you in technology and data being language.
Mm.
I think one of the problems with technologists, with people working in IT department, is that they somehow tend to neglect that it's a language, right?
Yeah, and often I mean in IT people are usually very focused on technology.
Mm-hmm.
And I talk about like my background is in data warehousing, so I understand data a lot through data warehouses. So the kind of idea that we put a lot of data together, we do something with it so it's more easy to use, and then
Mm-hmm.
we use it for reporting. So I look at it from this perspective. Of course, if someone is like a process owner and working with ERP tool, they're looking at data because they're producing it, not reusing it. They're looking at it differently. But I think that this idea that there is a language inside it, and that the language should be something that we should understand it the same way. I think that that's the problem, that we don't have shared words. This is also
Mm-hmm.
one of the things why I like modeling, conceptual modeling so much, is that it kind of forces this shared vocabulary to appear.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I very much agree. Very much agree. So you did actually modeling when you worked in data warehousing. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, or well, not exactly when with the data. Well, with the data in the data warehouse. So
Mm-hmm.
when we did this with business, so and conceptual models, unfortunately, at least at the moment, don't yet very well represent what is actually built in the data warehouse. So it's more like the idea of conceptual modeling is to describe the data in the business. But I hope
Mm-hmm.
that this will come together through like data mesh or other interesting concepts. I think that there's something that can bring this closer.
Yeah. Yeah. It is a quite a gap between the conceptual modelings and the physical layers of data and technology, right?
Mm.
Speaking of language and technology, I think it is quite obvious that when you talk about SQL having both syntax and semantics, it needs to be understood as a human language of some sort, right?
Mm.
And I very much agree that we need to do that. But to a certain extent, I also feel that a lot of technologists are trying to take away the human element, the cultural element of
Mm.
technology. Is that also something that you have seen, or is that your what would your approach be to implementing data catalogs with this kind of background?
Well, I think that some of the things that I've thought a lot about, or some of the revelations I had, that well, I was part of choosing the data catalog for my previous company, which was UPM.
Mm-hmm.
And I also lived with this choice for 3 years, building the catalog. So um, there the idea was that the catalog was very strongly tied to the governance, data governance initiative. And
Mm-hmm.
a lot of what I see in companies is that they're trying to build the data catalog like separately without any kind of data governance framework. So they're just trying to build the tool, but
Mm-hmm.
it's a tool. I mean, how I formulate this is that there is like data governance and its tools, data catalog and data modeling. So I think that to build a good functioning data catalog, well, technically it can function just fine, but if you want actually for the end users on the business side also to get value out of it, then it would be very important that it's kind of developed together with them, and that there is this idea of the framework of the governance behind, which is driving how you develop the data catalog and what you enable it in it the next. So I think that these really have to go together. So you have to involve business. You can't develop it as an IT. That's the number one way to kind of get it wrong.
Very much agree. Very much agree. It goes back to like the fundamentals of domain-driven design, right? For example, as Eric Evans formulated it. Also, you mentioned data mesh. That's the revival of domain-driven design for data, right?
Mm.
Trying to design, trying to implement technology and model data without taking into account the subject matter expertise of the domains themselves it's a pretty dangerous approach, right? Because that is. Have you seen that?
Well, I would say that what I've seen kind of before, and also before we started this initiative in my previous company, is that there is this kind of division, or that IT is very central around pipelines. So we build pipelines. These, again, I will stay in the data warehouse context. So we have source systems, we have ETLs or other accelerators that take data, do stuff to it, and then we put it in the warehouse, and then it's usable. But there can be this green noise effect, that the pipeline is working perfectly and everything is green and it's performing in a beautiful time and everything, but the end users are unhappy because the pipeline is working fine, but the content inside the pipeline, the reason why we actually built the pipeline, the data, this is not good. So there is this mismatch between like technology, like the pipeline, and the stuff that runs in the pipeline. And I think this is the thing, that we are not really focused on the stuff that runs in the pipeline. We're focused on the pipeline. That's the wrong thing. Of course, the pipeline also needs to work, but this stuff that runs in the pipeline is the actual value bit. And describing this is, to me, the purpose of the kind of catalog, so that you can understand what we are producing and what is the value and how it's produced and what you can use for this.
I think that is a very, very good way of explaining this dilemma, Säde. I think the simplicity you just mentioned here, the pipeline runs, but the data inside it is not valuable. It's not something that the end users can actually use. That is a very, very precise way of describing the distinction between IT and business and what they value. Because the pipeline from a technological perspective is running, but what is inside it is not something that the end users can actually use.
Yeah.
If we move towards the topic of this podcast, data democracy and how we democratize data, how would you have touched upon it already, but how would you describe, what is your ambition? How do you actually change this reality from the reality of running pipelines with poorly defined data in them towards a state that is more democratized, where you democratize data better for the business, for the sake of the business? Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, well, I think that if we think about democracy as a term in general, then inside every democracy there is governance of some type. And idea of governance inside a democracy is that governance should represent the interest of the majority of the people. And if we involve majority of the people in data, then governance can't be an IT-led initiative. It can't live inside IT. It can't be just one team that does it. So it has to be something we do together. So both IT and business together. what I see as some of the, things that are not, why this is not happening, is that there is usually knowledge gap inside from on the usage side, so on the business side in the people. So I said they don't really understand the language of the tech, and they can't see what data is available, or how they could use this, or if it's available for them, or if you can combine it with this. And I said the apples versus oranges famous problem, where you have three numbers of the same thing, and instead of debating what we should do in the business, we are debating which number is correct. So, but what this requires is that business actually has to claim the ownership of the data. So they have to say that we own the stuff that runs in the pipelines. You own technology. We work together. And that is like that is what I want to promote. And then for this, there are tools. I mean, I'm a tech person, so I think tools should make your life better. This is not how people view IT tools or BI tools or warehouses, but they actually are built to make your life better. So I want to see that you get business value out of the catalog, you get business value out of the models. And I want to see that the data governance initiatives are built like on the culture of that business, because you can't really you can't force this kind of things. You have to build them inside the existing processes of the company. So these are the kind of things that I want to work on and improve, because as said, I see so much potential in the data catalog to help, but the implementations that have come out of it, they are not usually giving the value that is possible.
I very much agree, and that is very much the philosophy behind this podcast and in general my initiative with data democracy. It's the fact that I think it's very simple and clear the way you put it, that IT tools should make life better, right?
Yes.
They should actually provide service and capabilities to people.
Instead of pain.
And come again?
Instead of pain.
Yes,
And
instead of pain.
frustration.
Yeah, exactly. And so and so that's a big paradox, that you see these implementation of technologies, also of data catalogs, that are not helping the business, but instead they are actually hurting the business. They shouldn't be hurting the business. They should be helping the business. And that is why, as I see it, we should work very, very hard on democratizing data. I think your point about data governance being for the majority of the employees is a very, very simple and good way to simply think of data governance. Many data governance functions tend, unfortunately, to do the exact opposite, right?
Yeah, so there is like this huge, I've seen these like initiatives where they take a framework which comes from outside, and then they try to implement that force that into the company. But each company has a culture. When you go into a company, that's the first thing you need to learn. How do I get things done in this company? So you also need to fit data into the existing data culture. So you have to build these things inside it. And I always say that data governance is not a separate process. It's not some new process that you build on top of your existing processes, but it steps inside your existing processes with which you ensure trust and quality, that you can trust what is coming out of it and you have quality. So it's just something that you need to inbuild it into the culture, that these things are taken care of. You can't stamp it over like that it's a review done once a year, that how did we do? You have to do it. It has to be an everyday effort. And again, for that, you need tools. So you can't, data governance is not an Excel exercise. So, no one has at least shown me yet how you could manage it through Excel. So I don't, I think it needs something more.
You mentioned that you implemented a data catalog for 3 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. So to what point would you describe it as a success, the implementation, if you want to share that?
Well, I think that the work that we did at UPM, it was groundbreaking in many sense because of the approach that was taken there. So there, the data governance was implemented like top down. I talk sometimes about top down, bottom up. So top down idea is that you first like build your governance structure and you use modeling to define like your key concepts that this is the what we want to ownership for, and then you assign ownership. And the first use case for the data catalog there was storing these concepts and ownership. So it started the implementation there very heavily together with the data governance initiative. And I think that we were growing that body of knowledge. So we were kind of collecting there an enterprise level repository of data, and also knowledge about the data, how it's where it's physically implemented, so the language of the data, and also how it is used in practice. So this is then the language of reporting. So we were bringing quite a lot of metadata. So I think that I was very happy with kind of the overall, how do you say, framework that we developed about how things go together. But I think that maybe the thing that was lacking there was that getting the business people who had these data roles really functioning in the roles. Because you can say that someone is a data owner, but that doesn't mean that they're going to actually do the work. And if they're not doing the work, then they are not really, they are not yearning for you to implement something. So you are kind of the second in line.
Yeah. And that is one of the difficulties of data democratization, of practicing a data democracy. That is that people have a hard time taking on the responsibility it actually takes. It's a blend, right, of duties and rights. If you want to democratize data, you have to play an active part, right? So I think that is very difficult. But did you have regular meetings or like reminders? Were you able to actually engage end users to take that data ownership and their responsibilities?
But there was trainings about it, but I think that there wasn't enough. So I don't think you can ever train enough.
No, agreed.
And also you have to understand that in a large corporation, these roles are going to change very often because people are changing between companies, inside the company. The businesses are doing organizational changes. So there is always someone who is new to this. So you would really have to have this kind of very strong like framework. But it's not only the people who are in the data roles, because I think that those people, if you work daily with data, you understand the problem. So you understand like what you want to fix and what's the benefit of fixing it. But I think that the bigger problem is how to convince the middle management that this is something that you should spend your time on, because time is money. So I think that is kind of getting the buy-in from there, that putting time into describing your knowledge of the data, so your tacit knowledge, and putting it in the catalog, that will actually pay off in the future. Because you talked about that do I consider like my experience, do I consider it a success? I do. But now if you would ask me that how do I demonstrate that monetarily or with Euroscience, then that's really difficult, because how do you value that you can now get some data faster than you got before, or you can understand it better? I mean, it can end up costing you more if you notice that the quality is not there, or you notice that, hey, this we have had this issue with this KPI for a long time now that I can see like how this is actually calculated. This can cost you money because you have to fix it. So it's so I think that this is one of the bigger challenges, that what are the correct KPIs that you should use to show that you are actually delivering value with this kind of initiatives.
Yeah. That is a big question, but of course, even a data democracy would need KPIs.
Yes.
And I am very certain, I very much agree that it's difficult. It's a difficult task. We simply need to find out how do we measure a data democracy. Ideally, you would have something very simple where you can say, okay, take the picture of the data pipeline you mentioned before. You have a running pipeline. It works from a technological perspective. But what is inside it doesn't work. The data itself, what it's transporting, is meaningless. And if you had some kind of KPI measuring the change in that would be awesome, right?
That would be pretty awesome. And
yeah.
that would kind of make proving your point, because with technology, that if you own something and you're trying to build something, you're always competing with everything else that is being owned and built at the same time. So you have to be able to prove value. But this is, and I guess to me, how I thought that would be the easiest way to tie data initiatives and value is that if there is some kind of, if in a company there is a data strategy, this can of course be quite varying in quality, but if you can tie what you are doing into the strategy, then that would be a really good way, or build your KPIs around the strategy. But I mean, I think this idea of like measuring data democratization as a whole, instead of like measuring certain initiatives, like just from a very narrow point of view, that's actually a very interesting idea. That would bring completely different KPIs.
I think it would. Yeah, I'm going to work more on that.
Yeah.
We should be in touch. We should be in touch on that.
Yes,
Säde.
Definitely. It's a very very interesting idea.
Yeah, thank you. Likewise, yes. Yeah.
Sorry, now I started thinking about it. But okay.
No, but that's perfect. That's it. You know, the entire purpose of this podcast is to explore this. I don't have all the answers. I don't. No one has. Data democratization is the process of cloud-based technologies making data open, accessible, discoverable, right? Not necessarily in that order, but that is what is happening with modern technology. But no one of us seems to know where we're going, right? So that's what we're examining here in this podcast. So I think that's a very, very good idea, Säde. And I will reach out on that one later on.
Yeah, and I think that this is also like part of why I wanted to go into freelancing, because I feel like that I did quite a lot of cooperations with different companies around this, so I have seen other implementations, but it is so true that there isn't like I call the data catalog a startup. So it's a kind of startup. So you try something, if it works, you keep it. If it doesn't work, you ditch it. And I think that why I like this area is that there isn't a Gartner report that explains us exactly what we should do. That doesn't exist yet. We can debate if that's the definite truth, but this is often like that. Okay, there is this Gartner initiative, like, or a report, like this is how you do it, and you succeed. So that doesn't exist. So it's that's why it's also like a super interesting area, because it's the unknown, like the new new world.
Yeah, it makes you curious, right?
Yeah.
Okay, Säde, it was a pleasure to have you on the show. I hope to stay in touch.
Thank you.
Okay, so these are the takeaways from my conversation with Säde. First of all, the data leader takeaways. The first takeaway is you should consider yourself a Babelfish, meaning that you should listen to the various technologies that you are looking to implement, and you should really understand what they're trying to say, and you should be able to translate that into the language of the business users. That is your obligation as a data leader. And second, you should never, ever implement data technologies without a data governance framework that is being implemented in parallel or already being implemented. And then third, consider data ownership. It's difficult and it's delicate. And in order to get data ownership up and running, you need to establish thorough training of data ownership responsibility in your organization. It's your duty as a data leader to do that, and you will not get a lot of results out of data technologies and your data agendas in general if you do not do that. Okay, some data democracy takeaways. First of all, consider that data is like language. It's not exact science, and you shouldn't establish a data democracy if you think that you can do it on the principles of exact science. Data is just subtle, it's difficult, and you need to accept that. The second takeaway for data democracy is that a data democracy supported by data catalog should be developed and driven forward by a data governance framework. Your data democracy will not thrive and establish yourself without it. And third, running technology in itself is not a proof of a well-functioning data democracy. You need to examine and understand the data that is running in this technology to actually ascertain that you have approached a data democracy. As Säde said, the pipeline can be running just fine, but the value of the data inside it can be close to zero just in parallel, and that doesn't work. So you need to ascertain that not only the technology is running, but that also the data inside it has value to the business. That's it. These were the takeaways.